All right. Good morning, everybody. Hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome to this edition of the Daily Market Commentary. I'm your host, Chuck Fulkerson. We're going to go ahead and dive in to our major markets, taking a look at the four major markets, S&P, NASDAQ, crude oil, and gold. From an educational perspective, looking for breakdowns and reversals as we had a big move down Friday, and we're seeing that continue at this moment in the S&P. So we are live this morning on YouTube, so if you've got any questions, please type them into the chat window. I'd love to be able to answer whatever I can as we are seeing a little bit of movement this morning. Now, you're going to see some lines on here from last night's live trade room because we do a Sunday night session. We kick things off for the week with our Sunday night live trade room. For more details, go to tradersarmy.com. Because, well, last night was a good night if you were in the live trade room. We had a pretty good move away from a decent wick over wick supply area last night, and we came back in. We've touched it a couple of times. We came and hit what would have been a target. Didn't quite make it all the way in, so you may or may not have gotten filled. I know some people wound up taking that thing early, but I would say that you probably have a decent breakdown below our Globex session low, below our low, which was formed right around the London Open. And I think you've got a good breakdown for price to continue to fall. There's no reason for me to look for longs in this point in this market. I think you just trade with the trend. Now, may we get a rally up a little bit? I wouldn't be shocked today to see price give us a little bit of a short-term rally higher. Just trying to recover a little bit of these losses. But remember, this week we have earnings coming this week, and they're big earnings. Netflix, Apple, Google, Netflix was last week. Apple, Google, Facebook's, Microsoft, Amazon, all of them coming out with earnings this week. And so if Netflix was any indication, it may not be a pretty day or a pretty week in these markets. So look for a breakdown below 42.19. In reality, I think you've got plenty of room for price to continue to fall even further. And we're getting a little bit of basing, right? And that's kind of what you want to see before a potential breakdown of the S&P. The NASDAQ last night did bounce off of our wick over wick supply area. Price traded into there. We got a pretty good move away. Hit it again, got another good move away. But we are sitting in front of what we would consider to be a little demand zone on this wick over wick. Well, but we're basing in front of the level, right? And what does basing in front of the level mean? It's the KOD, kiss of death. And so I would look for another breakdown in the NASDAQ as well. Since that level has already been hit, let's look for a breakdown below 13.2 as another opportunity. Now, I do like this area up here as a short if we rally back up to this 13.585, because this is an area which was in the past a prior level of support. Old support oftentimes becomes new resistance, and it's a bit of a wick over wick supply area below a pivot high. So those wick over wick supply areas that come in below a pivot high are oftentimes going to be the ones that we want to pay the most attention to. This is kind of where the masses start to take over, and we start to see that there's a little bit more strength of downside movement. So between those two, the S&P and the NASDAQ, I like both of them continuing shorts to the downside moving forward. The Russell 2000 has a very similar picture. We can see, though, that there's not as clean supply up above us. We did have the wick over wick in the Russell as well. It didn't quite make it up to that area last night, and not as clean for a breakdown, but anticipated it would continue to fall. And then the Dow Jones, also similar picture, look for the breakdown below the low. So if we get below the Globex low, all bets are off as to how far down we can continue to fall. There's lots of room. There's open air down there. Now we're down less than 1% this morning, but we are still down a bit in our movement. All right. So looking at our energies and metals, crude oil, crude is sitting right around 100, and we did break below that 100 last night, and so that was the breakdown we were looking for last night. We did get a breakdown. we had a little level of demand here as our target. We've hit that, and we've dropped down even further. So now what I would do is I would use this area up above as a potential reversal for a long. So keep an eye, or excuse me, for a short. So keep an eye on this 99.68 by 99.11 as a potential short. You could also certainly still have $100 as a potential short on a whole round number. So you've got a little bit of a level on top of a level set up here. I will tell you, I like the lower one a bit better than the upper one. Formed at a pretty good time of the day. And a potential reversal point if price does indeed come back into that region. What about a long? Where do we get long again? Well, looking on my 4-hour chart, my next area of demand is down here, but really that's a retest of all this area to the left. And so by being a retest of all this area to the left, it doesn't really bode well for a super strong bounce. And, if you look at this on an even bigger scale, call it the daily chart, we are just continuing our big, gigantic descending triangle, right? Pretty big descending triangle that's being continued in the crude oil market. So keep an eye on that one to continue to break down, right? I think that as we see a little bit more of the economic easing on oil here in the U.S., they're trying a couple of things from a policy standpoint, and let's see if production ramps up. That's going to help to bring price down just a little bit. Gold has come into a confirmation area of demand. It's hit that level. It's now basing in front of the level, and then that means it's the kiss of death of said level. So I don't anticipate a bounce off of that area. Let's remove that level at this point. I would say that you've got a pretty good supply area right up in here. If we come back in and retest that, frankly, don't know that we will. If we continue to fall from where we are, I do like actually what was recently formed, like in the last 15 minutes, 1916.1 by 1917.5 as a pretty good supply entry in gold. As far as your longs go, there's really nothing down here to stop us. We've got basically clean air since we've gotten below this line, which was a bit of a support area. If you can see that line right there, which was acting as support in the future. Natural gas. So one of the things we're looking at is a nat gas gap and go. A gap and go is when we gap in the direction of the predominant trend outside the prior day's range. And I don't have an entry yet in the gap and go, which means that the gap and go is still very playable. We just have to get below the first candle's low. Haven't done that yet. Once you get below the first candle's low, your stop is above the first candle's high. And our first candle being our first 60-minute candle, which would be this candle right here. This would be our controlling first 60-minute candle. So entry is below the first candle's low. Stop is above the first candle's high. The initial target is a 2-to-1, although you certainly may be able to pull a bit more than 2-to-1 out of that trade. So right now that'd be 6179 as our entry, stop, and target. Copper coming down hard. I thought that we would have a little bit of a stall here. Not really much to speak of. If price rallies back up, you've got a couple of decent areas to look for that are worth paying attention to. Clearly, this is the origin of the very strong drop, and this happened last night around 8 o'clock, and it's been falling off ever since. I just like the origin of the move. All right, it's almost a little too obvious, but sometimes the levels that are too obvious are the ones that really you should just take. They still make a fair amount of sense. We did look last night at a number of different bonds, currencies and things like that. Not a whole lot in the ZN and the ZB, but in the currency market, we looked at a couple of setups, one of which being the euro. Now, I did not get the basing necessary in the euro for an entry, unfortunately, because you see this box I have here. We were looking for quality basing right here. I was asleep, didn't even get to see the basing, but we definitely did get the breakout trade that we talked about, but we didn't get the basing in there to give us the entry. So I don't know that it really, truly set up for an entry. Did create an expanded range candle, which is a good opportunity for a short heading forward at 1.079 by 1.0809, right back up into this area here. Canadian dollar was the other one that we looked at for a short. We did get a good breakdown on the Canadian dollar. So if you're in that one, at this point, it's moving your way. Take your stop, move it to break even. I think you've had enough of a time that it hovered around the breakout point. Take your stop, move it to break even. I think that one's going to continue to run for a little bit. I still like this area up here as a reversal if we come back into that region. A couple of the other currency markets that I'd looked at last evening, one of which being the Japanese yen. I'm shocked and awed that we did not continue our breakdown in the yen. We actually hovered above there all night. And so that's the first time that we've actually seen any sort of strength in the yen in a while. Doesn't mean I'm changing my overall trend direction, but definitely, we got a couple of days or at the end of last month with a rally. Let's see if this little bit of basing here gets us a little bit of a rally. I mean, if not, you can take a swing trade below the low, because that's really the next leg down in the Japanese yen. We've been talking about this one now for a few weeks, if you guys have been watching regularly. Australian dollar, we've got a little level up in here to pay attention to, but nothing at the moment. So those are my major markets: S&P, NASDAQ, Russell, and the Dow, all of them looking bearish this morning. Look for the breakouts. Be patient. Wait a little bit. We are getting some selling pressure up here, but that would be the spot to get short. And if you have any questions, as always, send us an email, support@tradersarmy.com. Thanks so much, guys. I'll talk to you soon. See ya.